All right. As I said, the title today is, of course, the roadmap to speaking success. And we're talking about encouraging our students to speak effectively and proficiently. And we're going to be looking at some materials from this Pearson title roadmap. Now, before we start with that, though, I want to give you a little background on why I chose this kind of topic, particularly focusing on speaking success. And to do that, I have to take you back quite a few years to when I originally started teaching. And I started teaching English in this city. Now, does anyone know where this city is, just from the picture? Can you put the name of the city into the chat box and tell me where it is? And this was where my first teaching job was. Come on, come on, come on. Someone have a guess. There's unfortunately no prizes for this, but I hope. Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. Oh, I wish there was prizes, Natalia. It's Bangkok. Yeah, I started teaching English. Thailand, we have there as well. Okay. Yeah, I started teaching English in Bangkok, and that was back in 2007. It's where I did my original teacher training course, and then I got a job attached to it. So I actually have a picture of me with my first class. Okay, get ready for this. Remember, this is in 2007. Ta-da-da! How cute, right? I'm talking about me, by the way. Don't I look cute? I have no beard then. But anyway, yeah, this is the first group of students I taught. And as you can see, when I started teaching, I was teaching primary. I still remember all these guys' names, it's really weird. I mean, you teach so many students throughout your career. You do forget names. I usually remember faces and I remember certain students, but sometimes you do forget names over the years when you stop teaching them. But it's interesting with your first class. I remember all of these guys, okay? So what do we have? At the end there, we've got Ken on the left, then you've got Lily on the right, you've got Sia in the middle, we've got Steve, you've got Sun. It's amazing. I can remember all these guys' names. The crazy thing about it, when I think about this and how time's passed, they're all probably at university now. That's crazy, right? We didn't keep in touch so much, right? But they're all adults. It's an interesting thought. I hope they remember my name too, and they remember their teacher back in 2007. Anyway, my experience, this was mainly chaos, really. It was my first teaching job, and these guys just ran in circles around me, I think. But, I obviously enjoyed it because I stayed in teaching and I had different experiences and taught different levels. And now I teach everything from young kids to adults to exam classes to business English. So I have obviously enjoyed teaching. And I tried to do a good job. I tried my best. Now, when I was teaching, though, these kids and trying to get through a lesson, there's something that I continually noticed about them. Now, these guys were not complete beginners at English. They'd been learning English all the way through kindergarten. Some of them had native speaking parents. So maybe someone from Thailand and someone from America or the UK. So they could speak quite a lot of English, but, there were problems with it. And what I found that in the classroom, you'd have two different extremes of students, You'd have, for example, Pong could talk a lot, but made lots of mistakes. So often, although he produced a lot of language and seemed quite fluent, I often didn't know what he was talking about, and it took a little bit of time to work it out. And then if you go to the other extreme, we had Ling Ling. This was a girl. Ling Ling was very quiet, but when she did produce sentences, she was usually actually pretty accurate, She was hesitant and reluctant to speak. But when she did, she was pretty good. Obviously, there was a big range of students in the middle of this continuum, on this spectrum. But I noticed that these students, their kind of problems kind of persisted. Ling Ling carried on being quiet, but a little accurate. And Pong carried on making a lot of mistakes, but talking a lot, okay? And I wondered, what can I do about this? I don't know. I'm just a new teacher. Maybe I can't do much right now. And I thought, they're very young. So maybe it'll just take a little bit of time as they get older. This will balance out a little bit. So a few years later, I changed my job and I moved somewhere completely different. Well, not completely different, to a completely different job, I should say. And I moved to this city. So I moved to a different country. Can anyone guess where this city is from this beautiful scene of traffic? Add to the chat box. Where do you think I moved to? Let's see. I didn't no, Malaysia. No, but you're in the right area. Oh, someone said it, Oksana. It's Vietnam. Yeah, a lot of people say India when they see this picture. It's Vietnam. This is Ho Chi Minh City at rush hour in Vietnam. I didn't move directly here from Thailand. I spent some time in Spain. I got different experience of teaching adults in different levels. And then I came back to Asia and I moved to this place. It was a nightmare crossing the road. It's a skill you have to get used to when you live there. And once I'd learned to cross the road, it was time to get a job, right? So that was the first thing. Cross the road first, then look for a teaching job. So then I got a teaching job and I actually start working in a university. So completely different students. I was teaching 18, 19-year-olds, and they were preparing to study for their degree subject in English, basically, with an Australian university. So think about it. I had a totally different level of students. They were obviously much stronger. They were also much more mature and much more focused on what they wanted to do. So I thought these guys will be completely different. I tried to find a picture of me with my students. And I was saying they're much more mature. This is the only picture I could find that one of my students took of me during a lesson in Vietnam. How nice, huh? All right. The weird thing is, I did this webinar last week, and I remembered the guy who's doing that. I'm still in contact with him. He's on Facebook, you know. And last week, weirdly, he sent me a message and asked me where I was living now. He's still living and working in Vietnam. He sent me a message and asked me where I was at the moment. And I must tell him, I must say, by the way, I use your picture in a webinar now in Ukraine. I'm sure he'll be very interested. Anyway. What did I find with these students? Totally different style from my first teaching job. But weirdly, I found the same problem, you know. They had much better grammar and much better lexis. But when it came to speaking, we had the same thing. We had, for example, hoa. It was a girl in this case. Hoa means flower, by the way, in Vietnamese. We had hoa. She talks a lot and she makes a lot of mistakes. Yeah, obviously her level was higher than the primary students. But, you know, the same sort of problem. And then we had Vin, a guy called Vin, very, very quiet, but usually quite accurate. In this case, Vin was quite good at writing. He was actually a really good writer. But when it came to speaking, he would be really shy and not be very fluent. Okay? So we had the same sort of problems, the same sort of extremes as I had in my primary class. And I thought, what's going on? And now I was a bit more experienced, and I wanted to see what I could do to help these students balance out their skills. And what I thought about was, you know, when we're teaching, when we're in the classroom, this is often how we approach it. We give students lots of grammar, we give them instruction, we make sure they know how to use it. We give them lots of lexis, we give them lots of words they can fit in around the grammar, yeah? But then often we just kind of hope that speaking occurs. We give them the tools they need, and then we go, okay, now have a discussion about this. And we sit back and wait for them to do it. Now, often that works, or at least over a little bit of time, the students do develop and they will start using the language that they know and producing spoken English. But sometimes they need a little bit more help. And we can do something to help them with that as teachers, of course. Not just giving them the tools they need, but giving them some coaching on how they can use the tools. So what we're going to do today, of course, is dive into this book, quite a new title from Pearson, and it's a title for adult students, but it could be used for university students or any adult students or even older teens. I think it will be fine for that also. And we're going to look at a certain section of this book, which is all about teaching speaking skills. Now, I mentioned that we give our students lexis and grammar, but what else is important when we want to encourage fluent and accurate speaking? Functional language is really important. And let me just explain what I mean by functional language, and then I'll show how I usually go about teaching this. If you think about any given social situation, right, we have some certain phrases that we use again and again. And this library of phrases that we have, we don't form as new sentences every time we use them. They're up here. There is somewhere tucked away in your brain. And for example, when you're in a situation, when you're asking for or giving directions in the street, if people ever do that anymore with Google Maps, I don't know. But if you're in that situation, you have certain phrases you use, don't you? You say, how do I get to? Yeah. If you're giving directions, you say, go straight ahead, turn left, go to the end of the street, etc. Okay. We don't think about how to form those. We just have these useful, what we call chunks of language or ready-made phrases. It happens in lots of different social situations. For example, what is the social situation here? What do you think's happening? What sort of functional language do they need? Put it in the chat box. It's not about asking for directions. It is, of course, something that appears in almost all textbooks at some point. Yeah, choosing a dish in the restaurant language. What I've called it is just ordering food. It's very important. It pops up really early on in any English course at quite low levels. And there's set phrases. We use it for this. What about that one? What do you think's happening here? What kind of functional language situation do we have? Could be various things here. What do you think? At the office, yes. Business meeting, yes. At work, something specific happening in discussion on negotiation. Okay, we got the idea. It could be any of those. I just decided it was making suggestions. So yeah, it's a business meeting. Maybe they're brainstorming. They're making some suggestions. Again, there's a set of phrases that we can use in this situation. What about the dog here? What does the dog want to say? What's the social situation? Apologizing, thanks, Oksana. Yes, of course, the dog wants to apologize, right? If only I could have a class full of Dalmatians that I could teach English to, I'd be a very happy man. My first dog when I was a child, my parents bought me a dog when I was 7, and he looked just like that. He was called Spot. Sadly, no one longer with us. Anyway, what does Spot here want to say? Well, apologizing and making excuses. Maybe he wants to say something like that. It wasn't me, it was the cat. I don't know. Actually, that would be something slightly different, really, wouldn't it? It's not really apologizing, it's blaming. We don't often cover blaming as functional language in a textbook, but, it is actually a function, okay? Now, obviously, we see these kind of sections in a lot of different textbooks. They have this functional language section. And what I want us to think about, just taking this example, as it's the most popular, and we see it a lot in textbooks, ordering food in a restaurant. Now, as I said before, when you go into a restaurant, you don't stop at the door. I don't stop at the door, at least in English, and think, okay, right, so I better decide what phrases I'm going to use before I get in there. I need to take my Lexis knowledge and my grammar knowledge, I need to put them together and make some phrases like, how do I ask for the bill? How do I ask for the food I want? What sort of modal verbs do I use? How do I make it sound polite? I don't do that. It's just automatic, right? Because all of the phrases you can see on the screen are all just stored away in the section of my brain that is about language I use in a restaurant. So look, there's different grammar here, but they all fit into the same category of restaurant language. Could I get another drink? I'd like the bill, please. Thanks, that was delicious. And for native speakers of a language, that's actually quite natural. That's how we use them. So what's the problem with using these same chunks of language when we're teaching our students too? Yeah. It actually is a pretty natural way to learn language. It doesn't mean that the grammar and the lexis aren't important, but it means that these phrases, if the students remember them and they become automatic, can be very useful in a speaking situation. We often call these phrases chunks of language, all right? And if we have this library of ready-made phrases stored away, it actually helps our students be fluent because they can produce them very quickly. It also buys them time to think. Maybe they have something more complicated they want to say, but it's going to take them a little bit of time to form the grammar and form the lexis to make a brand new sentence. Well, while they're doing that, instead of being silent while they think of the perfect sentence, they can produce these chunks of language, and it can really help with fluency. Also, as the chunks are pre-formed, accuracy is there too. So they sound much more natural and a much more accomplished speaker of English. So this is what we're going to focus on today. And as I said before, functional language is often found in textbooks. You'll often see that there's a functional language section at the end of one particular unit, all right? And that's exactly what you see here in a roadmap. So this is at the end of Unit 8, and we have a section here called English in Action. So one page here is one lesson. And English in Action is basically English in speaking, and it's about functional language, okay? Now, imagine now that you're my students and you've come to the class. This is the lesson we're going to do, but how would I approach it? What I'm going to show you now is exactly how I'd approach this lesson, which, if we look a little bit closer, is all about making excuses and apologizing. So we're back to being this Dalmatian who broke the, what is it? A teapot. I think it's a teapot, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So we're all about making excuses and apologizing today. And how would I start the lesson? The first thing I would do is make sure the students have their books closed. And what I would do first is introduce a scenario to them. And this is the scenario. Right. So I tell the students we're going to be talking about apologizing and making excuses. And then I would show them a picture of, well, a present and a cake here, a birthday cake. What might someone be saying sorry for? If I show you these pictures, what might be the apology might be about? What do you think? What went wrong? What does someone have to say sorry about? Let's see, someone's typing. Yeah, five people are typing. Come on, what do you think it is? I'm sure we've all forgot your birthday. Exactly, belated birthday. Someone's forgotten their friend's birthday. That's exactly what it is. So I might invite the students to guess, just like I did with you guys. And then I give them a situation. I say, okay, there's student A and student B, and I assign who is A and who is B. I say, student A, okay, it was your birthday yesterday, and student B, who is your good friend, forgot all about it. Bad student B. All right. Student A, okay, I want you to start a conversation with B. And you're going to say, I know you forgot my birthday yesterday, right? That's the first sentence. Student B, it's then your turn to apologize, to say sorry, and to give a reason why you did that. Okay. This is before I've given any language input to the students. The level of the students here, they should be able to come up with something, but don't give them any input yet. Just give them the situation. Now, what usually happens, what often happens, I should say, in the classroom is we give the students a situation like this, and then we say, go, start talking now. And what happens, of course, is complete silence as the students look a little bit like that, because we've given them quite an artificial situation. The classroom is always a little bit artificial. It's not the real world. And we've said, okay, start talking now. And they need time to think. So the first thing that can go wrong with fluency, for example, when you're trying to set up a speaking activity, is we rush into it, I think. And I've been guilty of this many times in the past. And I realized what really helps, one of the first tips, the thing that can really help your students is, rather than just trying to force them to start speaking, give them a few minutes to think about what they're going to say, all right? And the students then feel like this. This is the best picture I come up with. This is like they're relieved. They're like, phew. So I do this all the time with my students, and it really helps speaking. It's such a simple thing. It sounds obvious, you know, once you've tried it. But often we just kind of rush into speaking activities. Think about it. Even with advanced students, they need a little bit of time to think about what they're going to say. The classroom, as I said, is really artificial. Imagine you're walking down the street in the real world, not in the classroom. Very rarely, if ever, would anyone come walking up to you, grab you by the shoulders and say, tell me about your favorite film. It doesn't happen. If someone did that to me on the street in English, I would be like, what? I don't know. Okay. But if you think about the classroom, that's effectively what we often do. You know, it's an artificial environment. The students come in, they sit down, we give them something to talk about, and we say, talk now. It's kind of weird, really, right? And it doesn't actually happen in the real world. In the real world, there's some kind of context, you know, there's something to tell us and to make us start thinking about what we're going to say before we do it. So giving a little bit of time to think about what they're going to say will really help with accuracy and, you know, the content of what they're saying too. It depends on your class and it depends on the task. Sometimes if it's a discussion, I get the students like to think about it for like literally 20 seconds, 30 seconds. If it's something a little more complicated, I might give them a minute or two. But then I would encourage them to stay to that time limit and then start speaking when the time is up. Okay, So after that, the students have a little conversation. They do it as best they can. Student B apologizes, I'm so sorry. Student A gets annoyed or accepts the apologies. It's up to them. Then, what we've done there, of course, is that we've improved fluency and accuracy and confidence, which is very important, to encourage them to start speaking by giving them a few minutes to prepare. What next? Well, next, we're going to go to another situation. So what I would do then is I'd stop them, or they would have just stopped speaking themselves, probably after quite a short amount of time. And I say, okay, right, thank you. I don't correct anything at the moment. I just go to today's lesson and the little input stage. And for the input stage, they need to hear some other people apologizing and accepting or rejecting apologies. This is the situation we're going to talk about now. So very different situation. And what I would do usually with my class is we're going to do a listening, and we're going to hear people having a conversation and apologizing. What I would usually do with the class is I would play the listening and I'd ask them. First question would be, what's the situation? Who is apologizing and why are they apologizing? That's it. For today, because of time, I'm going to give you the situation, tell you what the situation is. But if it was my students, just so you know, I would let them just work it out from listening the first time. Still with their books closed. They don't need to open their books yet. But for you guys, I think you can see what the problem is and what the situation is. What we're going to do is we're going to meet a guy called Alan, and we're going to meet his mother, and they're going to have a conversation. Alan and his mother. Who do you think is going to be apologizing in this conversation? Who do you think? Put it in the chat box. Do you think it'll be Alan saying sorry, or do you think it's his mother? Yeah, exactly. Of course it is. We all know, right? Of course it's going to be Alan. It's not a husband. It's a kid. Well, it's her son. You'll see when we do the listening, it's not a child. It's an adult son because he has a job. He mentions his job. But yeah, his mother has been away. She comes back and the kitchen is like this. It's a mess. And we're going to find out what happens during the conversation. Now, after the students have identified the situation, which we're skipping that part, I would say, okay, what I want you to do, we're going to pick out some language, and the language is about apologizing and accepting or rejecting those apologies. All right. So Alan's going to say sorry a lot and in many different ways and make some excuses, and his mother is going to decide if it's okay or not. Now, if you have a very strong group, you could get the students just to listen, again, books closed, and to write down the phrases that they hear, okay? To make it a little bit easier, what I would do is say, okay, student A, you're gonna be listening only to Alan, okay? A for Alan. Student B, you're gonna be listening to his mother. So student A would be writing down the phrases for apologizing, and student B would be writing down the phrases for accepting or rejecting the suggestions, okay? Now, this is for quite a strong class, but I'm sure you guys are extremely strong at English, of course. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you guys a task now. We're going to listen to the conversation between Alan and his mother. And as you hear these useful phrases, these useful functional chunks of language, I want you to very quickly type them into the chat box so I can see them. And let's see how many phrases we can very quickly pick out of this conversation. All right? So here we go. Let's listen to Alan and his mother having a conversation about the dirty kitchen. Okay, here we go.
Unit 8, Recording 10.
Conversation 1.
Hello? Are you there, Alan? I'm home.
Oh, hello, Mum. You're back early. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow.
Alan! This kitchen is a terrible mess. Why haven't you done the washing up? And you haven't taken out the rubbish. Oh, what a terrible smell. What happened?
Oh, sorry, Mum. I just haven't had time. I've been so busy at work. You've no idea.
Honestly, Alan, that's no excuse.
And I had to take Mrs. Jones next door to the hospital. I was there all day with her.
Oh, excuses, excuses. Oh, well, never mind.
I'm really sorry. It won't happen again, I promise.
I hope not. Just clear up now.
Okay, so yes, I saw lots of suggestions for the phrases that were used there, both by Alan and by his mother. Exactly, we had he was at the hospital with the woman next door. Poor Alan, he's been so busy with work. Yeah, but his mother was said there's no excuse. But I think they're still friends. You know, she said just clear it up now. Okay, so what we had there was the interaction, but the students now are getting input. So they're receiving new phrases that they could use in a situation where they're apologizing or accepting or rejecting apologies. Now, as I said, with strong students, you could do what you guys did. And I could say, student A, write down Alan's phrases, and student B, write down his mother's. But, you know, that might be quite difficult for some classes, understandably. Well, now we can take a look inside the book. All right, so this is when I get students to open their textbook, and we can look closely at how these phrases are picked out. See, in that section there. Now, what we have here, rather than the students having to write down the entire thing themselves, we have some of the useful phrases, but with gaps. So the students, to encourage them to notice these phrases, they have to listen carefully and complete the missing gaps. Now, can you remember any of these? What about number 2? Let's do number 2. It's a little bit easier. So I've been so busy at work. What did he say? I just haven't. Oh, someone's right. Oksana seems to be right. What have we got? I just haven't had time. Exactly. Yeah, I just haven't had time. I think so. Let's see. Great. So there are the phrases the students are listening for, and that's how they're completing them. Now, the important thing here is they're identifying key chunks of language, yeah, and they're isolating the language, because these are the chunks of language that they can use in the future when they do a speaking practice. All right. Now, in the textbook too, as well as them picking out some phrases, there's also a table with some other phrases. Yeah, there's many different ways to say the same things, and if the students can master these different ways, they can sound really proficient in English and sound really fluent and successful with it. So there's more phrases here because actually in the book we only listen to the first listening, but there's another situation where apologies are happening and they pick out even more phrases from that too. Okay, so there's more listening to do also. What do we do next? So we got the phrases isolated. Well, what the point of that is that at the beginning of the lesson, we had that speaking task where I give them no language. Hopefully what happened with that is it didn't go so well. Hopefully the students could talk, they could produce some language, but you know, their range of language wouldn't have been very good. Maybe they stopped speaking quite early, all right? Hopefully they noticed that when they did the listening, they thought, okay, lots of different phrases that I could have used that I didn't. Right, now I see I can use these phrases that I've picked out of the listening when I do it again, maybe in the future. Let's see what happens. But from there, we need to do something else because we've got all of these isolated phrases for apologizing and accepting or rejecting, but we need to encourage the students to remember them. If we just give them the phrases, what will happen is they'll take them, they'll look at the table, and then they'll close the books. And if they do a similar task later, they'll do it exactly the same way as they did it the first time. Guaranteed. That's what happens. They won't be able to remember these phrases. And we have to do something to make these chunks of language more automatic and put them into that library of chunks that I said students have in their brains. And the first thing we do for that, of course, is drilling. It's a simple thing, you know, but drilling is really important. Research shows how important it is. If we just give students phrases on a paper like this, in the book, in a table, they will remember them when they see them again, but they won't remember them to say them so quickly. So they need to sort of articulate them. They need to produce the phrases in order to help them remember them. And it's a simple thing to do. And in the first instance, it's easy. You know how it goes, right? So I would say to the group, it won't happen again. And the students would say, it won't happen again. And they repeat after me. You could do it with individuals. You can do it with the whole group in a chorus. I'm really sorry. I'll put it with a bit of emotion. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. And the students copy. Perfect. And it needs to be done. But it does get a little bit boring, doesn't it? We all know that this can get a little bit boring if the students are repeating these phrases over and over again. Maybe it works, but it's not so much fun. So we need to vary it a little bit. And one way we can vary it is doing it like this. So we got the phrase, I'm really sorry. How about we build it up from the back? So we start off with sorry. The students say sorry. Then I say really sorry. The students say really sorry. Then we finish the whole sentence, I'm really sorry. They say, I'm really sorry. We varied the activity a bit and making the students more aware of how the chunks of language stick together. And this is a technique called back chaining. And it's one way to vary your drilling so the students are more engaged and more interested in it. Okay? So back chaining is one way to vary drilling. What else could we do? One of my favorite things to do, after the students have done the drilling, they need the drilling first. They need to hear you saying the phrases, because now we're going to do something called a mumble. And the mumble involves the students, or involves the teacher first, saying the phrase without opening their mouths. Sounds crazy, right? And how does this encourage good speaking? Well, you'll see, all right? Let's try it out. Imagine you're my class, and I'm going to say one of these phrases, but I'm going to say it with my mouth closed. I want you to write in the chat box which phrase I'm saying. Okay, get ready. See if you can work it out. Ready? Which phrase is it? See, a lot of people, I'm really sorry. Fantastic. Exactly, it is. Yeah, amazing, right? I didn't even open my mouth. I didn't say any words, but you understood it. Let's try another one. Let's try something a little more difficult. It's a little harder, but see if you can do it. I'll be impressed. It won't happen again, Natalia. You got it. Yeah. It won't happen again. Fantastic, right? It's really funny. And the students find it amazing when you do this because they realize they can understand English just from the sounds produced and not the words themselves. You can do this as a competition. Often I would do this and get the students to write the phrase on paper and hold it up when they know it. So you could have teams or you could have pairs. So it's a little competition. You could also just get the students to do it together. So they try it out with each other. You do it a few times with them and they practice it with their partner. It's important the students produce the mumble themselves too. Now, what's the value of this? Well, number one, it's letting the students hear the rhythm of the language. It also helps them hear the intonation and the stress involved on each word. So it's really helpful. It's not just about them remembering the phrases. It's about them remembering how the sounds are produced and how they sound in natural English. Really fun activity. Can be done as a game. Really fantastic fun. I enjoyed doing that. I think you'll have fun with it. I'm going to do the rest of the webinar now, completely in a mumble. So, I'm joking. Okay, I'm not really going to do that. That would be too difficult. We're going to move on to another activity to encourage the students to remember the phrases. And this, we've had a mumble. We're moving to a jumble, obviously. All right. What does a jumble mean? Well, this is when the students are much more familiar with the phrases because we're adding a little bit more, a level of difficulty, and we're making it more interesting, and we can set up competitions and games. Okay. Just like we did with the mumble, this can be a competition where the students are writing down phrases as you say them. How is it difficult? Well, I'm going to say the phrases for you, but I've mixed up the words. All right, I've mixed up the words in those phrases. And what I want you guys to do is to write in the chat box. I want you to write the phrase in the correct order. Okay, so the first person to complete the phrase will not win a prize, unfortunately, but will win my respect for taking part. Thank you. All right, get ready. So write this phrase in the correct order. This is easy one, but you've got to be fast on the keys. Sorry, really, I'm. Fast, fast, fast. Sorry, really, I'm. Go, go, go. Oh, yeah. Oh, there's a typo there. Okay, we got it. I'm really sorry. It's difficult when you've got to type it really quickly. You can do this, obviously, if you were teaching on Zoom. It's even easier because we do it exactly the same way as I'm doing with it now, with you guys now. So online class, it works too. Okay. All right, next one. Let's do a more difficult one. Again, it happen won't. Again, it happen won't. Come on, come on, come on. Who's going to be first? It won't happen again. It was, I think, was it an Oksana? It's moving too fast for me. Well done, guys. You're very good at typing as well as English. All right. The last one. Here we go. Get ready. It's a difficult one. Excuses, excuses. Just ha ha ha. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was excuses, excuses, but I mixed it up. Did you see? I didn't say excuses, excuses. I said excuses, excuses. Think about it. All right. All right. So great fun to get the students engaged and also to get them playing a game. You know, it can be a little bit competitive. But by this stage, when they're doing the jumble, hopefully, a lot of these phrases are becoming more automatic for them because they've got to be fast. So they're starting to get them fixed in their mind and they're almost ready to use them in a speaking situation. Which, of course, is what's coming next. What have we had? We had the students practicing a little activity without any input. Yeah, and maybe it not going fantastically well. Then they had the language input from the listening with Alan and his mother, and we picked out the phrases. After they picked out and isolated the important phrases, we did the drill, we did the mumble, we did the jumble, all right? So the students, the back chaining also, the students are getting used to using the phrases. It's about time that they started to use it in a more of a realistic role play. And that is exactly what we have circled, squared, can you say squared? Squared here on the page, here we go. So these are 6 situations the students can act out. So you're putting them in pairs with one student apologizing, one student accepting or rejecting the apologies. But now they have lots more phrases they can use because you've given them throughout the lesson. Let's take a closer look at those situations and look at number 6. Notice something about number 6. Yes, it's exactly the same as the first activity that we did. It was your birthday yesterday, your friend forgot about it and didn't get you a present. All right. Now, I chose that first activity directly from this final activity, because what I would do now at the end of the lesson is I would repeat it. Okay. And this is something we kind of avoid doing in class often. We think, oh no, it'll be boring for the students. They don't want to do the same activity again. But it's so valuable, you know. If you are learning to play the piano, you don't get a piece of music and play it one time and then say, okay, it's boring, I don't want to play it again. You keep playing it, don't you? You practice it. You get better as you do it again. And that is exactly what happens when you speak in a language, right? So what I would do is I'd get the students to repeat it. But this time, they're going to use the new language that they've learned. If you want to vary it, if you do think it'll be a little bit boring, it's easy to vary it. You just change the partners. Simple thing to do. Just change partners. They'll have different ideas. They'll have different situations and different excuses. So you can make the situation different anyway. But very important to repeat the activity with the new language. Now, what we find here as we're coming towards the end is what happens, of course, when you repeat the activity. What the students will hopefully realize is, okay, when I first did this activity, it wasn't very good. I didn't have much language and I struggled. Then they move through the whole lesson. They get to the last activity and they go, wow, I've really learned something today. That was so much easier. And I had so many more phrases I could use. Obviously, I again give them a little bit of preparation time so they could decide which phrases to use, because they cannot use all of them. But they can see their improvement, all right? So hopefully that means the students leave the lesson and think, wow, my teacher's amazing, and I actually learned something today. And not only that, but you as a teacher, you got to see them attempting this task right at the beginning of the class, and you might have thought, okay, for one time, you might have thought, it's not going too well, but that's good for the first time, because for the rest of the lesson, they're going to find out so much language they can use. And at the end, I'm going to see the improvement. I'm going to be happy as a teacher. They're going to be happy as students. And they're going to leave with some phrases they can actually use in the real world the next time they've forgotten their homework, for example. You're helping them give excuses for forgetting their homework. All right, so in summary, let's take a look at what we looked at today and the key points. First of all, we had the importance of preparation. It came up again and again in whatever situation, whatever teaching situation you're in. Before a speaking task, it's a good idea to give at least a little bit of preparation time. Sometimes I just say to my students, if I give them discussion questions, I just say, read the questions. Don't start speaking yet. And we have like a few seconds of silence while they read. And then I say, when you're ready, start talking to your partner, rather than pushing them into it before they understand what they have to do. So really important tip for whatever speaking activity you're doing. The next one was, of course, we just talked about noticing the gap in their knowledge, the gap in the language that they have. That's what happens in the first try. And then in the second try, they fill the gap and see how their language is improved. Of course, before that, they need to have the language input. They need like a listening. They need to hear an example of a conversation and hear the language in a very natural situation. Because when they're picking the language out of the conversation, it makes them more aware of the key chunks they need. To make these chunks fixed in their minds, we need to do some drilling and some practice before the final role play, when everything, hopefully, comes together. All right. And these activities are done really well, I think, in this title, Roadmap, which has a real focus on communicative skills and the communication ability of your students. All right. So that brings us more or less to the end of my little webinar today. That was the Roadmap to Speaking Success. I hope it's useful. You can adapt any of these techniques to whatever material you're using, of course. It's the way I do it. If you like it, please feel free to take some of my ideas. If you do want to take a look at Roadmap, of course, I think you'll find it's done in a very good way also. Okay. Hopefully, some of you will be looking at Roadmap very soon, because you're going to win a Roadmap of your very own in a few minutes. Let's see. Okay, just before we get to the lottery or the raffle, whichever you want to call it,